Welcome, everyone. First, let me thank the Society of Illustrators and its dynamic executive director, Annelle Miller, who had to step out for the moment because she's
seen enough
being
of me
dynamic.
this week.
Yeah, probably.
She's seen enough of me this week.
But she's off being dynamic. For one, for inviting you, two, for putting up the show, and three, for this fun evening, which will be
Let's
fun.
hope it's fun. Yeah. Don't jinx it.
Yeah, really, don't get ahead of
Don't
yourself.
set the bar too high.
So my name's Karen Green. I am the curator for comics and cartoons at Columbia University, and I had the incredible pleasure of interviewing this fine fellow in Monte Carlo a year ago, because that's how librarians roll, baby.
And comic book artists. It's the only place we could find to get together, you know?
Exactly. So some of this is going to be like a little overview that we did from Monaco, but we had a nice conversation the other night, and I threw in some more slides, and there's some new stuff as well. The Dracula, so we're going to talk a little bit about the Dracula, and then I found the Michael Moorcock from the 80s, which is so pretty.
Oh boy.
So state your name and occupation, sir.
My name is Mike Mignola. I am a comic book artist since 1982.
Good year.
Yeah. Best known for the Hellboy.
It's true. It's like at work, people were like, "What are you doing tonight?" So I'm having this conversation with Mike Mignola, and they're like, "Oh, I don't know who that is." I said, "He created Hellboy." They're like, "Oh my God!" So how does it feel to have your creation be more famous than you are?
It's fine.
Oh yeah.
I'm very.
Okay.
It's yeah. It cuts down on a lot of explaining. I created this thing called Hellboy, and they go, "Oh, I know what that is." I didn't know it was a comic, and you go, "That's fine." Because that means it's paying the bills without me. That's fine.
But so you started in '82, and
Yes.
You were working.
That's actually. I think that's actually '83 because I was.
This is '85.
Is it? Well,
yeah, it's '85.
I know it took a long time to draw it. No, I was a terrible inker for a year. I think I came to New York in '82, 83, September '82, I think it was. Might have been '83, I can't remember. A long time ago. I was a terrible inker for a year, and the editor who gave me my start as an inker knew I was a pretty terrible inker, but I didn't have any confidence in drawing, so I tried to have a career as an inker, but I was terrible at that. So eventually he gave me my second try. After my inking career floundered for a year, he said, "Are you ready to try drawing comics now?" And since I have no skills beyond a little bit of drawing ability, I had no choice but to go from being a terrible inker to a terrible penciler. I proved
Not
that I was
the usual trajectory.
No, not at all. I proved that I was unsuited to most of the things that they had me try to draw, and then they said, "Well, we have a raccoon comic. Maybe he can draw that." So I did.
It's funny because the other night you were talking about how important it is for a writer to find out from his or her artist what they do and don't like to draw, and you said you really didn't like drawing cars.
Right.
And I was wondering how long it took you to draw that horse.
Well, that wasn't very long because it's not a car. It doesn't need to look like anything. It's just a pile of crap.
It doesn't need to be recognized. So the thing is drawing things that are recognizable.
Oh yeah. No, you give me bullshit science fiction horse crap. I can fake my way through that stuff.
So I see you're working in a bit of the Kirby crackle.
Yeah, a term I hate.
Tell me why.
Because I hate the word crackle for some reason.
Really?
Yeah,
Even
I hate
if it's spelled with a K?
I hate it. I just hate it. There's a whole laundry list of words I hate, and that's on the list.
Most people have a laundry list.
Yeah. I call it Kirby dots.
Okay, so you worked in the Kirby dots.
Yeah, I did. Though actually that's more Al Williamson's space.
Ah.
Al did that and would slap Zipatone over it. So there you go.
There you go, indeed. You stayed with Marvel for a while.
I did. Most of us. Well, you mentioned the Moorcock stuff. I was at Marvel for a while, and then it became very difficult to work under Jim Shooter because he started having very specific rules about what the artwork could be like. So I fled to First Comics for a year and drew this dreadful Michael Moorcock book. It wasn't a dreadful book. I wasn't.
You'll
there
see,
yet
you'll
as
see,
far as
and
being
you're
able
not
to-
going to agree with him. That's all I have to say.
But it was a great learning experience because at Marvel, there was the thing of I have to draw. I was a Marvel Comics kid. I loved Marvel Comics, and so there was a certain amount of pressure and expectation, and I didn't know who the fuck First Comics was. So I went over there, and they didn't seem to have any idea what they were doing, so they just left me alone to this Michael Moorcock book, and I did the best job I could. But over that year, at least, even though it was mostly terrible, I started kind of figuring out who I was. And then after that, and I don't know what year, somewhere in the late 80s probably, I came back, either Marvel or DC lured me back, and then I just bounced back and forth, as you did in the late 80s, early 90s, from job to job, Marvel and DC.
I notice you said the other night you don't like drawing cars, you like being able to draw cemeteries, and you're already working in the cemeteries as early as 91.
Yeah, probably even earlier than that. But yeah, it's just, whatever. Around this period, I was back living in New York, and I would wander down the halls at Marvel, and they'd say, "Can you do this cover?" And I'd say, "Sure," and I would do it overnight, and I'd bring it in the next day, and it was just fun. There was a period there where I did for a year. I did nothing but covers because it was so easy, and I was just playing.
How long did you live in New York?
Which time? I moved in 82, 83. New York chewed me up and spit me out, as it tends to do, especially when you're terrible. A scared boy. And then 5 years later, maybe 87, I came back. Lived
Where
a
did you
certain
go?
number of years.
Where did it spit you back to?
California, where
Okay.
I'm from. Came back, and then it's a blur of California back to New York, back to San Francisco. I could make a chart of all the different moves, but I lived in New York several times.
Did you still have to be in New York in order to work for these guys, or was it a point yet when you could just FedEx?
Yeah, even when I started, you didn't need to be here unless you were terrible. If you were terrible, it was a very good thing to live here because you can show up in the Marvel offices like with the begging bowl, and and they go, I feel kind of bad for this kid. I mean, my inking career ended shortly after I left New York because while I was here, I could, this book's late and we don't care if the inker is terrible. So you stay up all night and you get the job done and you get the pages turned in the next day. And then you move to California and they go, now he's far away. We have to FedEx stuff to him. And we've got other terrible guys here.
Who can get it to us in an hour.
So yeah, when you're terrible, it helps to be close.
This is good career advice.
Yeah.
Everybody.
And it was a different planet. I mean, the business was so radically different, then. So, yeah.
Yeah. Makes me sad. So what was it like to move between Marvel and DC? You grew up reading Marvel. You were a Marvel kid. You weren't a big DC fan.
No,
what was it
not
like
at all.
to start working on these, legacy, legendary characters?
Superman was a nightmare because he's got to be perfect looking, and it's not what I do. And Batman was easy because the less of him you draw, the better he looks.
It's all shadows.
So of all the stuff I did at DC, Batman was the one thing. While I apologize to Batman fans. Nothing against Batman. It was all Batman was to me was a guy who was really easy to draw.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he fits into your kind of chiaroscuro.
He was probably the first mainstream character that people seemed to think it was okay for me to draw.
Did you get letters for your other stuff? I mean, did people
I
write and go
I
like,
would
why are
get
you giving this guy
people who
Mignola?
come in from New Jersey and wait 2 hours in line to tell you how terrible you are. Why would they let you draw my characters that I like? I had relatively early on, I had that reputation as an artist's artist. The fans are never going to like what you do, but the artists kind of go, "You're doing something kind of interesting," but the fans were not loving it. But Batman is the one. I think the first thing that they kind of went, "Oh, yeah, keep him there."
When I found that image, I thought, you can tell that it's a 90s image because his feet are so tiny.
That was me being me. I don't know that I got that from somebody. I think a lot of people got that from me.
Ooh.
I mean, I don't know where I got it. That was me just trying to figure shit out.
Yeah, because I mean, Superman's feet are normal.
Well, he's wearing big shoes. But there's also a couple years, you can tell by the signature, there's a couple years between that and that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always fun to see the evolution of signatures. So.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
So this is 86. This
Yeah.
is like kind of Corben Mobius mashup. And that seems like a very...
It's funny, I met Mobius while I was working on this
The
book.
helmet is very Mobius to
yeah?
me. Don't you? Anybody else going to back me up on that? Thank you. I like this crowd. You're good.
Nice.
Phew. So...
That's me. I mean, what it is me drawing a fantasy character that nobody had done before. So I was looking at old fantasy illustration. I wasn't looking at comics. So a lot of the costume design is taken more from like the
Okay.
little purse thing and the dagger. That's real Howard Pyle. That's Howard Pyle ink drawings.
Yeah.
So I was looking
Get a
at
nice
that
pile in the
kind of
lobby over
stuff.
here.
Yeah. No, actually, it's a Wyeth.
Oh, sorry. You're right.
Yeah.
I was thinking of
Ooh.
upstairs.
Yeah, that's not good. You almost fooled me with that one.
Yeah. So close.
So that's just me trying to do stuff where nobody was. I had no preconceived notion of what it was supposed to look like. And again, I figured out some stuff about myself and what I wanted my stuff to look like. I was a long way from knowing what the hell I was doing. And it's too bad because I really did love the Michael Moorcock stuff. When I fled Marvel, I knew a guy in Berkeley who was the agent for the Moorcock properties. And they had offered me a different Michael Moorcock book a year or two earlier, which I couldn't do. But when I fled Marvel, I called him up and said, do you have... I noticed the one book you're not doing is the quorum stuff. Do you have the rights to do it? And he said, yeah. And I said, are they interested in doing the comic? Because I just wanted a place to hide. I wanted to flee Marvel and a fantasy book about weird creatures and fantasy villages and shit like that. No cars. My career is entirely
and
made
graveyards.
of... Yeah, my career is entirely made of trying to find some place where I can draw what I want and not embarrass myself.
How did this do? Do you know?
Who knows? It's
getting reprinted though, right?
Yeah. Oh boy. I'm thrilled about it. In hardback. Yeah. Excellent.
Deluxe.
Yeah.
Deluxe.
Yeah.
So this is Gotham by Gaslight, and at one point you said that you were beginning to turn away from superheroes to the kind of work you wanted to be known for when you were doing this, and this is in many ways kind of an early Hellboy.
This is the first job where I made the middle piece was a piece I just did. It was probably a private commission, which I actually see now that DC has licensed it as a statue in Japan. And I'm like, nobody ever paid me for that. But that's the kind of stuff you just go, well, work for hire, that's what happens. But no, when I was offered Gotham by Gaslight, I had just come off of doing a big superhero book. And this Cosmic Odyssey thing with all the DC superhero characters in it. And somebody up at DC said, I was doing a Neil Gaiman backup feature in a Swamp Thing book.
Wow.
And somebody said, well, I remember who it was. And it wasn't, Vertigo didn't exist yet, but the Vertigo attitude was there. Mm-hmm. So it was like, what are you doing, Mike? And I went, I'm doing this thing with Neil. And he went, oh, really? Because I'm surprised because you're such a good superhero artist. And I went,
Really?
oh shit, I didn't ever mean to be a superhero artist, but I just come off doing a year's worth of this giant superhero book. And the way I remember it, seemed like the next day I'm at the DC office and somebody sits me down and says, do you want to do this thing? And it's Batman and Jack the Ripper, and it's Victorian era, which is my kind of stuff. Other than Batman,
Right.
the Victorian era and ghost story and
Yeah.
mystery stuff is more my kind of thing. And I thought, shit, it's going to be a nightmare to do it. Coaches, horses, no cars, but a lot of buildings. But it's the first thing I ever did where I said, if I do this and if I can pull this off, it will brand me as a different kind of artist. So I did.
So even though it was a superhero story, you felt that it was going to take you away from being considered a superhero artist because it looked so different.
Yeah, because it was a guy who didn't have any powers. It was a guy jumping from rooftops, not flying through the air. And it was going to be, again, all the horribles, the coaches and horses and mood and the crappy parts of Gotham City that look like kind of standing in for Whitechapel and newspapers blowing around. And so I did this.
And you still managed to do, buildings, but not in great detail. I mean, you evoke the skyline without really going crazy.
But you look at the cover of that,
Yeah, the cover's
and
terrifying.
there's a bunch of real street things in there. I spent a lot of time finding reference for 1880s New York City.
Time and Again. All those photographs in Time and Again, Jack Finney book.
Yeah, no, but
1882.
various publishers. I remember going down to the South Street Seaport to like these little museum places and picking up a ton of paperback books of New York street stuff.
They used to sell stuff, like Dover used to have like 8 million books of like the streetscapes of New York.
I had them all.
Do you still?
Probably.
Good.
I would never use them again.
But it's good to know they're there.
Yes,
just in
exactly.
case.
Just in case.
Just in case. So, still Batman, but you've said that you generally refer to this as the first Hellboy book.
It really was. It was the one that made Hellboy possible. I had burned my bridges with Marvel for certain reasons, and so living in New York, the only published and DC was great because I knew everyone in editorial, and it was a very comfortable place for me to work. I just didn't give a shit about any of the characters. And the great Archie Goodwin, for some reason, one day said, "Why don't you try writing an issue of Batman?" Because he edited the Legends of the Dark Knight series, which was a little bit more oddball stuff. So I came up with this pretty much Victorian-like ghost story thing and shoehorned Batman into it. So it was the first thing I plotted myself. Now, I actually plotted one little short story for something else. But first full-length comic I plotted myself. And it was fun.
You enjoyed writing?
I didn't enjoy writing. I enjoyed making it up.
Okay.
Writing is different. Writing means you have to write the dialogue. And I like to draw the picture. I like to make up the story and draw the pictures and let somebody else figure out what people are saying. Especially if it's Batman, because I have no idea what the hell Batman would be saying. Something very serious.
Yeah, he's pretty stoic.
But, coming off of this, it was like, oh, I've made up my own story where I get to draw whatever I want. How do I go back to being at the mercy of somebody sending me a script? So from this point, it was, if I can get away with doing this, making up these kinds of stories, and am I going to shoehorn other people's characters into those stories, or do I just make up my own guy?
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
And that's what you did.
Easy.
So my other question is, why are all the best online images of your work from Spanish editions?
I don't know.
Neither do I. This is a question that's been tormenting me.
Oh, no.
Because it was so much easier than going into the library and scanning.
Oh, no.
Because then you got like that curve in the gutter. I don't know. Somebody's done this so much better than I could. So, the birth of Hellboy.
Exactly.
Oh, that's not the birth of Hellboy at all.
No, it's not.
That's something else entirely.
It is.
That's what I get for just looking out of the corner of my eye at my notes instead of actually looking at the pictures. This is something entirely different. This is you being asked to reinvent Kirby characters.
Yeah, because I can draw sort of like Kirby. So if you want Kirby, why wouldn't you just use Kirby? I have no idea.
Because the characters exist.
Yeah. So, yeah, this was one of the weirder, odd jobs you get, and you just go, well, that might be kind of fun for a while. So I did, I think, 2 or 3 different times this project was dead, and then they would call me 6 months later and say, would you mind doing more designs for this project that we know is never going to happen?
And what was the project?
It was a animated New Gods.
Which never got made.
Which never got made.
It would have looked pretty cool if it looked like that.
And you know, I was already doing Hellboy because it's the kind of job that if I was still groping around trying to find work, it would have been great because everything is less work and pays more than doing comics. So when you start doing the quickie magic marker drawings and they're paying you by the hour to do that stuff, you know, that's a pretty good gig unless you're kind of going, yeah, but I've got my own comic that I want to draw. So this was just one of those weird novelty, yeah, that'd be kind of fun for a while.
How long did you work on it?
I have no idea. You know, I mean, that stuff goes really, really fast. And then I would just lose interest after, 5 or 6, 4 or 5 days. Same, I did this a couple times. I did one for Disney. Same thing. It's like I'd work on it for a couple days, and I could do it full time for probably a couple years. But it's like, that's enough. You can figure it out from there.
What did you do for Disney?
I was the production designer for the film Atlantis.
Oh, that makes more sense. Okay. I was trying to picture you doing princesses.
No. Though I did do a princess in Atlantis.
Oh. Did she look like...
Feminine? No, but they fixed that.
They would.
Yeah.
Okay, we're actually not going to get to Hellboy yet. We're going to go a little bit back to influences and favorite artists, and your comment, never meet your heroes.
Yeah. But in this case, it worked out.
Yeah.
I didn't want to beat Frank Frazetta because, Frank is always had a kind of a checkered reputation as far as being a human. But and I was so in awe of the guy that I just didn't want to have a bad experience meeting him. And of course I was never remotely in any place where Frank would be, except that Frank did come to the San Diego convention one year, and I just happened to share a booth with a guy who knows him. So while I'm doing whatever I'm doing, and Frank was my all-time biggest influence. He was the guy I wanted to be. And when you hear this, Mike, there's somebody I want you to meet, and you turn around and it's him. And it was, and Hellboy, the first Hellboy collection had come out, and I think I held my shit together pretty well, considering it was Frazetta, and I biggest influence I had, blah blah blah. And he looked at the Hellboy stuff, and he said, I don't see me. I see Mobius, or not Mobius. I see Alex Toth. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool because that means he's looking at it, as opposed to thanks, kid, or whatever. Yeah. And that was pretty much the extent of our exchange. That's all I remember him saying. I thank God don't remember what I said, but I didn't want to bother the man. I just rolled out the you're my biggest influence. Well, you were on your own turf.
You weren't bothering him.
Yeah,
you weren't
I always
think
I'm bothering all these people. I'm sure everybody here has something better to do, which is why I talk really fast, because I want them all to be free to do what they want to do. But no, that was cool. I met Frank, and I got away with it.
And you got out of it alive.
I got out of it alive.
There were no checkers.
Without one of that horrific experience where you just go, oh no, can I never like his work again? Fortunately, the worst person I ever met, I always hated their work.
Oh,
so
good.
That was fine.
Perfect.
Yeah.
I love that. Later on, you'll tell me who that is.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to.
So
horrible.
Now we're at Hellboy.
Yeah.
The original '91 sketch and then the '94 debut. How does this evolution happen?
Well, because I wasn't known for anything in particular, because I always bounced around to a bunch of different things, I was doing a convention somewhere, and they said, we want a piece of art for the program book. And because I wasn't known for anything in particular, I just drew something for fun. And that shape in the middle, I finished the drawing, and I went, it looks like there should be something there, so I wrote Hellboy. And I thought it was hilarious. I thought, that's the funniest name. Didn't think anything about it. I just thought, I remember distinctly laughing. Maybe not laughing out loud, but just thinking, like, that's a really funny name. And I didn't give it any more thought. And then after the Batman book, and I'm thinking, well, I want to make up my own character, I realized I need a name for my character. And the only name I've ever made up is Hellboy. And I had drawn a character kind of like this once or twice. I guess by that time I had drawn every convention I'd been to. I'd drawn Batman for everybody. And a couple people had said, just draw whatever you want.
That's so nice when people say that, right?
Yeah, it didn't happen very often, but it happened at least 2 or 3 times. And so I drew something kind of like this guy. I liked the shape of the horns on the forehead. I liked the tail. There was no thought that it was anything. It was just a bunch of shapes I liked. And I know how short my attention span is. So when it came time to make up my own character, to try to do my own comic, I went back to, I drew this guy just for fun. If and I'm a big fan of like Victorian era occult detective kind of stuff, but had done Gotham by Gaslight. I ain't doing the Victorian era again. I love it, but it's a bitch to draw because there's horses and spoke wheels on carriages. Yeah, not gonna do that. And I knew that any kind of regular human, I'd get tired of drawing him. But if I drew this guy entirely for fun, let me do some variation on that guy, and maybe I won't get sick of drawing it. I mean, and again, when I said I'd do Hellboy, I assumed I was going to do one miniseries. No one would buy it, and I'd be back, at DC trying to get a Batman book that wouldn't have the Batmobile in it, and maybe figure out another way to do a story without buildings. But that was the plan. So I did it, and it worked well enough, so I got to keep doing it.
You could do Batman like. Does Gotham City have like the equivalent of Westchester County? Where you like?
I don't know anything about Gotham City, except that it's made of shit I don't want to draw. And in fact, a couple years into doing Hellboy, we did a Hellboy Batman crossover. I kind of jokingly said something. James Robinson and I were talking, and he made some comment. I don't remember what he said, but I said, "Oh, so if we did a Hellboy Batman crossover, you'd write it." And then he went and pitched it to Archie Goodwin. I wasn't serious about doing it, but I did think, well, at the early days of Hellboy, maybe if I do this Hellboy Batman crossover, it'll be good exposure for Hellboy. And that was the cincher, because suddenly I had to do Batman. And actually I did the Batmobile in 1 panel or 2 panels. But I had to ask DC, what does Commissioner Gordon's office look like? What does this character look like? And I'm like, oh no, if I make up my own shit, I never have to ask anybody what does the inside of that guy's office look like? So that was just one of those, oh, what would it be like to do work for hire again? Oh, it would be horrible. Don't ever do that if you don't have to. So that was that.
So going back to your saying that you thought this was just a funny name and it made you laugh. You're a funny guy. I mean, he's funny already, right? But the comics are humorous. I don't know. Of course, nobody can read this, right? Because it's all so small. You have to trust me. This is so fucking funny. Where does it come from? Were there
fear of the audience thinking I take myself seriously? Because I do write big stretches where there are prophecies and all this other shit, and I become so embarrassed when I'm an hour into writing that I never really thought about putting humor into Hellboy. Almost nothing about Hellboy was ever planned. I just wanted to get away with drawing monsters and not cars. But I guess some of my personality went in there. It just became the personality of Hellboy. Oh, the only way I knew how to write Hellboy was what would I say, and usually I would have some kind of wise guy kind of answer for stuff. So I could write Rasputin prophesizing on and on and on. And then I would be so embarrassed by what I was writing, Hellboy would have to just tell me to shut up or something like that. I couldn't have two pretentious assholes talking to each other. One of them had to point out that the other guy was a pretentious asshole. Yeah.
Well, that's important.
So that became my writing.
So there was a slide that I had in our last talk that I actually took out, where I had a panel, actually, this last two panels here next to a 3-panel progression that Jack Davis did in Mad Magazine, which had like a very similar gag. And I was so excited that I'd found this like correlation, and then you said, "Oh, but I didn't read Mad Magazine."
It's just, I mean.
So what was funny to you growing up? Where does your sense of humor come from? Like what influenced that? What made you laugh growing up? Don't tell me Three Stooges. I'll be so sad.
I did like this. I was not a Marx Brothers guy. I was not Addams Family. I was Munsters. I wasn't. And again, maybe I would have liked the Marx Brothers had I seen them. But the Three Stooges was just stupid, so I liked them.
Yes, they are.
I mean, it's one of the things a lot of people trip over when they ask me, well, where'd you get this? And where'd you get this? I don't know where I got it. I just thought it was funny. And so I have a certain sense of humor that I'm trying to put on paper, and I'm not looking at, well, how did Jack Davis do it, or how did this guy do it?
Right.
I'm just going, how can I know the rhythm I want. How do I do that? So there's not, I'm not trying to translate another medium. I have my story and my rhythm of my storytelling, and it's just trying to figure out how to do it. And again, this is after drawing comics, Screw-On Headers, after drawing comics for 20 years, 15 years. Yeah. So there's a lot of years of trying to get control of how you tell a story. You have to have your tools. And it took 15 years to feel like I knew how to use the tools. Yeah. And then once you have the tools and you know how to use the tools, then you can use the tools to do things. Yeah.
Amazing Screw-On Heads. How many people have read Amazing Screw-On Head? Oh, good. Excellent. All the rest of you don't have your hands on, go out right now. Buy yourselves a copy.
Sadly, but it'll be back in print soon. Thank you, Dark
Amazon
Horse.
Marketplace, man.
Yeah.
You can always get secondhand stuff. So process.
Yes.
This is what things look like before they look like what we know that they look like.
In some cases, yeah. I mean, the Hellboy, this is stuff for Hellboy in Hell. And one thing I did learn working on movies was to do pre-production. So Hellboy, most of Hellboy, I was just kind of making it up as I went along. But after I killed Hellboy and threw him into hell, I did take a couple weeks and just not completely design hell, but when I killed Hellboy and threw him into hell, it was so I would take him out of the real world, which I was barely drawing cars in, and put him someplace that was entirely made of just the shit I wanted to draw. So I did fill a sketchbook with shit I wanted to draw. So yeah, this is some of that stuff. And of course, these are better than any drawings that are actually published in the comic. It's just, it's when you're doing stuff when you're just playing and figuring shit out, that stuff always works better than when you're actually, oh, now I'm going to draw a page.
So you shouldn't think about things too much when you're actually drawing.
Yeah,
you should just let
that doesn't work either. But there's just something to be said about drawing for fun and just trying to figure stuff out, because you're not thinking about, well, how am I going to ink this and what color is it going to be? You're just drawing. So
it stops being fun because you have to think about all the
it becomes a little. I mean, it's still fun, but it's a little bit more work. Yeah. You're aware you're on stage, whereas this is you're practicing with nobody listening.
So I talked about humor, but you also use silence really effectively. You do wordless panels for long stretches. Is that so that you don't have to write?
Yes, I will do anything not to write. My major goal, when I realized I was going to write the comic myself, my major goal became do not embarrass yourself, which means I can rely on the artwork, but I'm not going to. I'm never going to be Ray Bradbury. I'm never going to be Neil Gaiman. I'm never going to write a paragraph explaining what the wind smells like. But I can hopefully do silent panels where you get a sense of place and atmosphere and stuff like that. So,
Would
yeah,
you
I mean,
ever
the
do
first one on the right-hand side, that's scripted by John Byrne. So he wrote a lot more than I ever would have. But, I mean, to me, the bottom panel, I don't know what it says, but I mean, the bottom panel would have been, if I were doing it myself, it would have been complete silent. But yeah, so that's, you use the tools you're comfortable using, and I'm much more comfortable using pictures than words.
Would you ever do a completely wordless story?
Yeah, if I could figure one out.
I have faith in you.
I mean, yeah, I've always, threatened to do a comic where you just zoom in and out of rooms. It would just be pure composition and traveling through things.
Oh.
And I've done long passages like that. But yeah, maybe. Who
Maybe.
knows?
That would be interesting. I would like to see that.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay, thank you. Done. So, getting back to influences.
Not an influence at all.
No, really.
No.
But
I was-
somebody whose work you loved.
Yeah, because it was so crazy. I've never seen that piece. Yeah, no, he was just one of those guys, like Mobius, that you were exposed to
Yeah.
at a certain age when Heavy Metal magazine came out, and you went, "Holy shit, what's this? This isn't Marvel Comics." So not an influence at all, except in the, this is different, and maybe it's okay to do stuff that's different.
Okay. Yeah, Heavy Metal is where I found him too, and that was. How many people read Heavy Metal in the 80s?
Because in the very first issue, I don't know if it was the very first issue, but the first issue I got my hands on, there was Mobius's Arzak, and there was Corben. And you're just like, my head exploded.
Yeah. I think Francois Schweten was in my first issue. I'm a sucker for the obscure cities. Lots of buildings.
Yeah. Not
He's very
a guy I
architect-
admire, but I never said I want to be
emulate.
that guy. Corbin, mostly rocks and big, phallic slug monsters.
There you
That
go.
I was much more in tune with his
Yeah,
sensibility.
that sounds about right. So eventually you got to work with him.
Yes. The last thing I ever expected.
Tell us about that. You have some Corbin stories. Are you willing to say them on tape?
Well, I mean, Richard is an interesting guy to work with because he's very much his own guy. He's not the easiest guy to communicate with because he's a little vague about certain things. But a mutual friend sent Richard an Art of Hellboy book, and I think Richard emailed me, or somehow we got each other's email address, and we swapped kind of fan letters, and I sheepishly put in, if you ever want to do a Hellboy story, and he was like, that might be interesting, and I'm like, okay, and
Did not expect
and
that.
and was very lucky to work with him for several years. And my favorite Hellboy story I've ever written is The Crooked Man, which could not have been done for anyone else. I always wanted to do a American backwoods Appalachian Mountain type story, and nobody draws twigs and old cabins better than Richard Corben. So that was the great joy of my career was that story, and I think it's the only Hellboy story that's actually creepy. So, and then we also did this one, which is weird.
Yes.
So yeah, it was a challenge because most artists I work with, I have a pretty good idea what I'm going to get. And I will be very specific with them about certain things. I don't write old school Marvel plot style. I don't write, a really vague plot. I don't give specific dialogue, but I give pretty specific pacing and panel description. And I pretty much did that for Richard, but every time I thought I knew what he'd do, he did something completely different. He'd write a scene that was meant to be creepy, and he made it funny. You wrote a scene that you thought was going to be funny, and he made it creepy. So the beauty of working with Richard is you had to kind of detach from what you were expecting and just allow yourself to be bowled over by what he did.
Nice.
And it was great. And something in never in a billion years would I have thought I'd have, half a dozen Richard Corben Hellboy stories.
That's so cool. So the other night when we were chatting, you mentioned this book and these guys.
Yeah, along with heavy metal, the great eye-opener of my generation was seeing this book with those four guys, who I was only really aware of, I guess, Barry Smith, the Marvel Comics guy, and Jeff Jones. Maybe I was aware of Bernie by then. I just remember there were two of them I didn't know, really wasn't that familiar with. But just that idea of guys who had done comics and then went on to do other crazy stuff. Again,
really
it was
crazy
one of
stuff.
it was one of the great things. After Frazetta, Bernie was the guy I wanted to be. And that was.
But look
huge.
at all those very specific.
I didn't want to be that Bernie Wrightson. No, I admire that Bernie Wrightson, but the Bernie Wrightson I wanted to be was the guy who was 90% solid black with a figure half emerging from it. That was that I appreciate it. Wouldn't mind hanging it on my wall, but I didn't say I'm going to do that.
I think I mentioned the other night, I got contacted by this curator at the Morgan Library. They're doing 2019, I guess, is the 200th anniversary of the writing of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and they're doing a big exhibition to celebrate this 200th anniversary. And they got in touch with me because they wanted to know, are there any comics about Frankenstein? Yeah, maybe a couple.
But how many good ones?
Yeah,
Not
well,
many.
yeah, well, that's true. I sent them a very curated list, but I sent him, just images of the Wrightson Frankenstein, and his brain exploded.
Well, what we talked about was the fact that how many illustrated edition of Frankenstein can you think of? Because Bernie did some little comics Frankenstein stuff, but he illustrated the book.
Yeah.
And I don't know I guess Lynn Ward.
Oh yeah.
Did
Ward,
a beautiful illustrated Frankenstein.
He did.
But nothing on the scale of what Bernie.
Yeah. No, that was really nasty sound.
No, and Bernie's thing was, I don't know how far it goes back, but Bernie's end-all, be-all of his career was to get in a place where he could illustrate Frankenstein.
Well, he was very lucky then. He got there.
He did.
So going from Frankenstein to Dracula.
Oh, yeah. Huh.
This is getting reprinted too.
Yes.
Long out of print. Where does this fit in your kind of career trajectory?
This is one of those jobs that's right before Hellboy. Yes.
You can see
I drew
that.
this. I started it in New York, finished it in San Francisco, and started Hellboy in San Francisco. So that's the only way I can remember in what order jobs were. I moved enough that I can kind of go, it was in the year I was in San Francisco that I wrapped this up, which worked out well because I was in San Francisco, 15 minutes from Coppola's offices. So I had access to all the photo reference and all that stuff. And I remember that I started drawing, or at least planning out Hellboy while I was in San Francisco.
Nice.
So this is pretty close to the end.
Wow. So we've talked about story. We've talked about what you do and don't like to draw. We've talked about humor and silence. You don't get particularly political in,
No.
but this was a very moving image that you put up just after Parkland.
I was very angry. I did this as a benefit, and I don't know, the guys who are doing the benefit book for the Vegas shooting are apparently doing a benefit book. They contacted me, asked me to do a piece, so I poured as much anger as I had into this piece. And then when the Parkland shooting happened, I said, I've got this piece. Yeah. And Dave had just finished coloring it. I said, I'm sure these guys aren't going to appreciate that I'm jumping ahead of their benefit book, but I'll be damned if I'm not going to put this out there. Because I'm tired of writing, oh my God, how fucking horrible. And that was exactly what I thought. And I think, doesn't the Time magazine for Parkland shooting say enough? I mean, it was like, exactly the but what else is there to say? It's very rare. It's only 2 things I've ever done where I tried to channel an actual feeling of a real event. They asked me to do a couple pages after 9/11, which I couldn't come anywhere near. I mean, even this. I mean, it's nothing near the way you feel.
Of course.
But it's a real challenge to try to put something out there, and this is a pretty abstract image, but you know, I did the best I could.
So a couple of years ago, you said, "I'm retiring from comics, and I'm going to paint."
I did.
And you painted. Semi-retired.
Yeah.
And your painting is quite beautiful.
Well, thank you very much.
But you're back in comics?
I don't know what the hell I'm doing. The plan was I'm going to take a year to paint, because before the year off, I would do like one painting a year. And if you do one painting a year, it means every time you sit down to paint, you got to relearn everything. And I thought, okay, I kind of like painting, or I end up hating painting and then forget that I hate it, and I think I love it, so I do it again, and then I hate it for a year. But I thought, well, what happens if I just roll from one painting into the next painting? Maybe I'll get better at it, or I'll learn not to hate it. And my year of painting lasted about 3.5 months. I did eight paintings that I kept. One that ended up in the garbage.
That's pretty good.
And yeah,
for
8 out of 9
months.
Keepers. That's pretty damn good. And it was fun. And I just ended up, at some point, it felt like it was work. You know, because I was doing them just for myself, but it was fun coming up with ideas for paintings. I've got a sketchbook that's got at least 90 or 100 little compositions for paintings. And they were fun to do, and for whatever reason, I just ended up sliding back into doing comics, which I suspect the rest of my career, whatever career I have now, will bounce back and forth between comics and doing paintings, because I can't imagine doing any, just the one. There's stuff about this that's liberating and fun and isn't comics, but I love storytelling. So I'm screwed. I will have to keep getting dragged back into doing comics.
Just once you thought you got out, they drag you back in.
I read an Italian folktale and I went, oh shit, I have to draw that. Yeah, so that's where I'm screwed now.
Is that coming?
I got to draw it, but it's only it'll probably be a 15 or 20 page story, which what do you do with that? So I have to come up with a bunch more stories so I can make
now you
book.
submit it to an anthology.
Who does anthologies anymore?
Oh my God. There's like a new one every week.
Yeah, but you throw it into an anthology and it's still not a book. It might be somebody's book, but it's not my book.
That's true.
Like The Amazing Screw-On Head. I did that one comic, and I did the 6-page story I did with my daughter, which is my favorite thing I've ever done. And you had these 2 objects that were out there. One was a comic that was out of print, and everybody thought it was just a cartoon. They didn't know it was a comic. And then my daughter's story that was lost in a little anthology that nobody saw. And you went, oh, those are the two best things I've ever done. Nobody's ever seen them. Oh, well, I need to make a book. This is a 28-page book. That's not a book. So you had to get in and do a bunch more stories. You have to get back in that place and do a bunch of stories with the same sensibility so you can make a book.
Are there any other folktales that appeal to you?
Oh, there's
a
a
few
lot
out
of
there.
weird shit out
There's
there.
a lot of weird shit out there.
I've been collecting these books for years, and I just haven't read most of them. So I know
I have a story
they're
for
out
you.
there.
I have a story for you to draw. I'm going to send it to you.
Okay.
It's one of my favorite stories ever.
All right. It doesn't have a car in it, does it?
Pardon?
It doesn't have a car in it.
No,
right.
no. It takes place in a shtetl.
Takes place where?
So Mignola, not a Jewish name.
No. No.
Shtetl, you know, the old country, the
Oh, okay.
little village that
All right.
that we all escaped.
Oh, excellent.
Should we see if the audience has some questions?
Sure.
Does the audience have some questions? This gentleman has a question.
When you were rising up in the 80s, was one of your contemporaries that you looked at as an influence, was Ted McKeever ever in there, especially as Metropole?
You know, I remember I did a couple backup features for Ted. And I don't know that Ted was necessarily an influence, but looking at Ted's stuff was super liberating.
Yeah.
And when I did, because Ted's stuff was so insane, when I did the backup features, I wasn't trying to do Ted, but I was trying to be as crazy as Ted, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was just I can really reach out there and try to do something crazy. So yeah, I guess he was kind of if not influence, a real inspiration.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yes.
So you talked about the humor in the book, which is prevalent, but there's also a sense of melancholy that sort of permeates it and kind of bubbles up at Hellboy and Hell. Was that something that you were aware of, or was that something that just happened?
There's a weird thing. I mean, again, almost from the very beginning with Hellboy, I mean, the first couple stories I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And then when I got comfortable doing it, I really just kind of let it be what it is. So a lot of it does reflect my mood. My post 9/11 Hellboy story, I was about to do a completely different book. I was living here, and I was going to do this thing, Joe Golem, Occult Detective. I was going to do it as a comic, which was about a partially ruined New York City. Well, suddenly that didn't seem like a great idea. But I had this little mermaid story in the back of my head for a long time that I wanted to do. And so I did that instead of the Joe Golem book. But it's informed, not on purpose, but it's informed with that 9/11, post 9/11 sensibility. There's a real sadness in that story. So I know guys who are extremely commercial, extremely controlled writers who would just say, 2 + 2 = 4, that's a story. But for me to make this stuff interesting, I just had to kind of go, well, this is what I'm feeling today, so I'll put it in there. At some point, it was just, I don't know if these are good ideas, I don't know if they're bad ideas. Someday this is a body of work you can give your therapist, and they can write a book. I'm not going to second guess myself. I don't know why I like this particular image. I don't know if it's good to like this particular thing, but I'm just going to hang it out there. I don't know when it just kind of occurred to me that what was exciting about doing the Hellboy stuff was really trying to take what's inside my head, my thoughts, my imagery, and put it on paper. I mean, Hellboy, really from the very beginning, there was nothing about that book that was meant to be a particularly commercial book. There was no part of me that said, you know what the fans want? A red guy with an idiotic name and a tail. I just said, I kind of like this. And then you get away with it, and you go, well, if I got away with that, then I could do this. And if I got away with that, I could do this. And then when you get away with Hellboy for a while, you go, well, I'll make up a book. Because Hellboy's actually become relatively commercial. Oh, well, shit. I didn't intend that. And it's very important that I'm from Berkeley, California, and it's like I still have to be relevant to Berkeley art students. So I'm starting to look like I'm a commercial success. So I got to do a book to let the Berkeley art students know that I don't care about making money. So I made up the Amazing Screw-On Head. Because no one on earth is going to fucking like this thing. I said to Dark Horse, here's a book nobody's going to want, but I want to do it. So pay me next to nothing because I don't want you to hold it over my head forever. I want you to publish it, but I don't want you to be able to use it as leverage. You know, we publish your vanity project. No one's going to buy it. So that book was entirely done to be something that only would appeal to me. Because there's a part of me that just says, I want to see if I can take what's inside my head, whether anybody wants it or not, and I want to put it on paper. And right away people go, oh, it's the best thing you've ever done. And you're like, oh shit, this is interesting. The stuff I want to do the most, I mean, this is where you realize I'm really winning the lottery here. Because the shit that I want to do the most is what people want me to do. Mm-hmm. And that. In all seriousness, that's really a spectacular. I mean, like I'm the poster boy for getting away with murder. I mean, I have no idea how that worked. So to some extent, there's always a part of me now that's going, well, it's. I'm trying to articulate something I don't know how to say, and now I've completely forgotten what I was trying to say. It's an interesting thing when you get to a place where you're not making commercial decisions. You're really just, I'm getting away with doing my stuff, and your focus just becomes not, when you don't take the audience into consideration, you just go, I'm just going to keep going as far as I can go in my direction. Just the goal is entirely to just take something that I thought of and tell that story as well as possible and never consider, I hope the audience likes it. I certainly want there to be an audience for this stuff, but the main goal is to put something out there that's inside my head, if that makes any sense at all. But and I'm well aware that many artists, or probably most artists, never get in that position where they've got the liberty to do that. Fortunately, Hellboy did turn into kind of a commercial, machine, so I can afford to do these other things.
Oh my gosh, I was going to say, I think we get time for one or two more questions, and like 17 hands go up. Oh my gosh, you sir, in the against the wall.
Hi. I was wondering if you can kind of speak about your daily routine when it comes to creating, and if you have any advice for cartoonists that maybe struggle to find that work-life balance.
One thing I learned, I took it for granted, but I found I had to say this to young artists when I was doing a workshop, is from an early age, I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew I would never make any money doing it. So I never planned on having a house. I never planned on having a wife. I never planned on having kids. I figured I would live in a studio apartment someplace so I could afford to do what I wanted to do for a living. What was really important to me was being able to draw comics or draw monsters or do my thing. But as far as my actual, so my goal, well, I don't know if that's really good advice for anybody. It's just figure out how much you want your life to be your work and adjust accordingly. I don't know that I have any particular advice except at least try doing what you want. If you've got something you want to put out there, find a way to put it out there. Even if it doesn't seem remotely commercial, especially if it doesn't seem remotely commercial, put it on your website or however kids do shit these days. Because I trotted Hellboy out there. I didn't think anybody was going to want it, but at least it was out there. And when I found out people wanted it, I'm stuck doing what I thought was going to be my hobby. And I mean, my days, I get up. Fortunately, I've always worked 7 days a week, so I don't know what the hell else to do. So I get up and I eat breakfast and I go in the studio, and at 5 o'clock, you know, it's time to have a glass of wine and then eat dinner. I mean, and then I go back in the studio again. My wife is thrilled to have me not in any other parts of the house, so it works out fine.
Oh my gosh, how do I make this decision? Yes.
What are your favorite tools to use for inking?
Stadler pigment liner. It's just a little gray pen. It comes in different sizes. I use I think it's an 03.
Okay,
And
we gotta
most
go with
days
one
I
more.
wouldn't be able to tell you the name of it. It's like a Jeopardy answer. The Continental Congress. Like, I didn't know that. I just somehow it's in there. So yeah, that's that. I use that. I use a brush with Higgins Black Magic ink to fill in black areas. Except Higgins Black Magic ink has gotten very thin over the years, so I thicken it up with some other ink that I
Somebody
can't
guessed
remember the
that
name of.
on Facebook, right? You put something up and somebody said, "Is that Higgins Black ink?"
Yeah, yeah.
That is so terrifying to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Hi. So
Oh.
I wonder if you could speak about the challenges that you faced in breaking new ground and getting your own message available for people to see, and how you rose to meet those challenges.
I got really kind of lucky, or I just played the game right, because I don't remember any particular. I mean, the challenges for me are just
Creative.
getting out of my own way. You know, I've never had. I got very lucky. I worked 10 years for Marvel and DC Comics, made enough of a reputation. I did that Gotham by Gaslight book, which was one of the few commercial things I did, but it was commercial enough. I had Dark Horse Comics that said, "We'd like you to do a book for us." I don't know of any other publisher that would have said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Hellboy," and they went, "Okay." They didn't ask what it was. They paid me to do it, and I just kept doing it. So, and they never pressured me to do it any particular way. So I was really just very fortunate to jump from a moderately commercial work for hire career to step over to doing my own thing, which was moderately successful. And then it helped to have a movie.
So maybe
I recommend that. If you can swing that one,
my
that's
question is a little different. What would you recommend for someone who is not taking the same route in working for the industry, but rather creating their own individual, unique, contribution to society?
I don't know. It's again, I did this ages ago. There's so many different, like I said, there's websites and self-publishing, and there's all these different ways to put your work out there. I would say just put your work out there. That's the best I can do.
Okay, let's take a few more questions. We'll do like 15 minutes more of questions. I'm not doing half an hour of questions. That would kill me. Gentleman with the purple.
And I'm wondering, when you did the Dracula for the Coppola production, you said you had access to photographs because he was down the street, what have you. And I'm wondering, how did that project work for you when you had, it was not just a little bit of direction, it sounds like it was a lot of direction because you were doing something that had been done in an adaptation.
Yeah, it was a bitch. It was a bitch. It was really. I'm not a likeness guy, but they had to kind of sign off on the likenesses for the actors. It was. On one hand, it was an amazing experience because I did have access to so much reference. I got roped into working on the movie, which made it extra bizarre. And they didn't really give me too much grief about what I drew. I mean, I had, the thing is, I had plenty of reference. So it was an entirely different challenge to take photo reference of a movie and try to arrange it. There was more emphasis on the way the storytelling was done, because I was trying to make it feel like my kind of comic, though 75 to 80% of it wasn't exactly me drawing my kind of images. If I got figures small enough, I didn't have to worry about likenesses. But you know, for big headshots, I had to have a photo reference of Keanu Reeves or Winona Ryder or, you know, whoever else.
What was your ultimate satisfaction with that project then?
I got a message on my answering machine from Roman Coppola saying, we're looking at the comic as we're editing the film.
Aww.
That was pretty cool. And there were a couple gags I pulled off in the comic that they said they couldn't pull off in the movie. So that was pretty
Yeah,
cool.
comics.
Yeah, for whatever reason, it's one of those movie adaptations that people really like, that I think stands on its own as a comic. It was just, you know, it personally, because of getting roped into the film and stuff, it's a great experience for me. I think of it more as an experience, not necessarily as the finished product. It was hard. I mean, it was, again, not being a likeness guy. It was just, I've never done anything like it, would never attempt anything like it again. But it was pretty unique.
Yes, in the white shirt.
I had a question mostly about how the digital age has sort of affected how you work.
I know nothing about any of that stuff. So that's a pretty easy question. Other than the fact that my work is colored digitally, I'm a pencil and paper guy, and I've yet to learn how to use my own scanner. So my wife scans my artwork. Eventually, she will make me learn how to do it myself. But that's it. I don't know anything about any of that stuff. I'm a book guy. I'm an old school book guy, and I don't have the entry level skills to be in my industry. But I've been here long enough that people tolerate the fact that I don't know how to do anything. So that's the best I can do there.
JJ.
How do you deal with all the various Hellboy spin-off things? What's your level of input and all that stuff?
Should I admit it's less and less all the time? It depends. I mean, the comic stuff, I work with people that I know, that I trust. Usually I'm hand-picking the artists, or I'm working with the I've only worked with 3, maybe 4 writers in 25 years on the Hellboy stuff. So when I'm not doing it myself, it's done by somebody I know. And it's mostly just a case of us, you know, like roughing out the broad strokes of storylines, like one phone call that will cover 5 years worth of the book. You know, because I don't want to tell the artist or the other writer what to do. I'll say, these characters, one of them is going to at some point turn into this, and eventually they're going to get to this place. And between now and whenever that happens, I want to give you as much free reign as possible. So that's been pretty comfortable because I always work with guys that I know. And then I usually either let them pick artists they want to work with, or, you know, I find artists that I want everybody to be happy. Because ultimately, I own all the material, which is amazingly guilt-inducing for me. So at least I want everybody to have a good time doing work that ultimately I benefit from more than anybody else. Anything outside of comics, I have less involvement with, especially things I don't give a shit about. You know, I might say yes to a Hellboy computer game, but that's a case where I go, if the computer game guys know how to do it, and my editor at Dark Horse can deal with them, let them deal with it. Apparently now they're going to do this Hellboy tabletop game with little figures and things. I don't know shit about that stuff, but I know a guy who says it's a great thing, and I will approve, you know, like the design for some of this stuff, but mostly it's just let the guys who do toys do toys, let the guys who do movies do movies, and it still takes up way more of my day than I want it to. It's just like
But you've never seen anything where you go, what?
Yeah, no, I see plenty of stuff like that, but you just kind of go, well, I signed that deal and I got to live with that thing. I mean, again, I'm the book guy. I want to control the books. Certainly the movies. There's nothing you can do about what they're going to do over there. But if they ask your input, you have to give it, and you hope for the best. But it's the kind of thing that could take over your entire life. I could spend my whole life working with Funko on the exact right color for the button on Hellboy's coat. But you look at it and you go, that looks pretty good, and then you answer the next email. I do have to do way more of that kind of stuff than I want to do. It's like, oh, the boots are wrong. Is it so wrong that I can't live with it? Well, okay, I'll write that one email that changes the boot color or whatever. But you got to cover a lot of ground, so you kind of pick your battles.
Black shirt all the way in the back.
Could you walk us through how you went from the original Hellboy drawing that was up there to the final iteration of what Hellboy ended up looking like?
There's a pretty huge arc. I figured out he looked better with a coat. That was big, and eventually his shoulders went away. There's a stylistic thing that happens where you just evolve this thing into the more and more the shapes you like. I don't know. It's just trial and error. There was no real other than okay, let's settle on 2 horns and give him a coat. There wasn't a lot of real conscious stylistic kind of stuff. It was just his shoulders just went away. As I got more tired, his hand got bigger and his arms got skinnier. It's just it was just ball and chain. That's how that happened, I think. But yeah, it's just 25 years of doing that stuff, and yeah.
Is that the same with how the other characters surrounding him sort of developed as well, like trial and error? Or?
Yeah. There's very little. Other than the initial drawing I did of those characters, there wasn't a lot of thought. It was just as you draw them, you try to do the best you can. And I'm one of those artists who's developed certain shapes they like. So at some point you just go, that's the wrong shape. I have to keep banging on it till it becomes a shape I like. Vague enough for you?
Beard.
I love your lighting and your shading. Can you talk a little bit about how you think about lighting the scene or your characters?
I don't think about lighting at all. I just try to make my figures solid. So for the most part, unless it's some radical thing I'm trying for, as a figure turns away from you, it gets darker. That's it. Because if I have to light a guy from here and then figure out how this side of his face is in shadow, it becomes very confusing to me. So I don't do it very often. It's really all my shading is just to make things solid. It's not meant for the most part. It's not meant for any kind of real lighting. There's no very little thought about a light source. There's none of that kind of nonsense. It's just I just want the stuff to be solid.
Sure, it breaks a lot of rules today. It works
What rules?
Well, yeah, exactly. It works in a really beautiful way.
It's comics. It's comics. I've had guys I've had artists I've worked with. I remember I thumbnailed this comic. I think it was, I can't remember what it was, but I thumbnailed this comic for another artist. And he said, yeah, but you're breaking the 360-degree rule. And I went,
What?
What the fuck is that? And it was something about, it was a film thing about spinning the camera around too far. And I'm like, yeah, but we're not making a
Jesus.
movie. You know, I can see in a movie you might get disoriented if camera's suddenly spinning around all these characters. But we're not spinning it around. We're doing still pictures. So, I mean, film is good for certain things. But to tie your hands with rules for film when you're not making a film,
That's
seems
crazy.
kind of silly to me.
Yes, sir. No, gentleman in the black shirt, yes.
The Magician and the Snake
Yeah.
is such a great story about the acceptance of death, and it was really beautiful to see that play a huge role at the end of Hellboy in Hell.
Thank you.
Spoilers. So I was curious if that was always your plan going in, or if that idea evolved in the writing process of Hellboy in Hell.
Because The Magician and the Snake, which is a story I made up with my daughter, or she made up, and I drew, because that I still think is the best thing I've ever done, and the most personal story, when it came to wrapping up Hellboy, as much as I wrapped him up at the end of Hellboy in Hell, I don't know at what point it probably almost started as like a joke. Oh, and then I'll have him go into a room and there'll be these shapes from The Magician and the Snake. Because I needed the ending to be my ending. I needed it to be an odd ending that felt perfect to me and not something where necessarily the entire audience would understand it. It just needed to be mine. Hellboy in Hell was a very odd comic anyway, and it really just, if I was going to end this thing, I had to end it for myself. Rather than some kind of epic battle or something like that. It just had to mean something to me. And again, I was amazingly not concerned with what the audience thought. I just like they're going to hate it. And actually, at the very end, I mean, I was like 2 pages away from the end, and I started thinking, no, I can't do this, because nobody's going to understand it, and they're, after following Hellboy for 25 years, they're going to want to lynch me because I did this weird fucked up ending where they're going to go, what the fuck does that mean? And then I couldn't think of anything else to do. And I had like 2 pages left. I'm like, well, I'm there. I've traveled down that road. That's the only ending I had. So basically what I hoped is that people would go read The Magician and the Snake, and then, which is again a vague story that means a lot to me, they would maybe kind of try to figure out what that story meant and then apply it to the end of Hellboy. There's a big gap there that's left open to interpretation. And when we did reprint, the end of Hellboy in Hell, we printed it with The Magician and the Snake. So at least it's in there, so you go, oh, I can't explain what the ending is, but here's this other story that has similar. I have my Mignola things, my Mignola shapes, and they mean something to me, and so I put them in there with Hellboy. So I just traveled down a hole and hoped people would follow.
Okay, now we are back to one last question.
You cheated Batman. Let Batman have it.
Okay.
How do you feel about political or social messages?
None. I don't know. Are there any in there? No, it's not. It's other than just me liking the things I like and having my own feelings about certain things. There's never been any conscious effort to put any kind of messages or anything. If you found any in there, let me know, because I didn't. They're not there on purpose.
Was it Sam Goldwyn who said when somebody asked him what he thought about message pictures, he said, if I want to send a message, I'll call Western Union?
Yeah, there's nothing. Again, it's just a record of the shit I'm thinking about, but it's not generally social. It's just monster shit I like.
Okay.
On that intellectual
yeah,
note.
monster shit I like.